سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome to the Quranic Reflections program with me, Muhammad Saeed, and Sheikh Noorud-deen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And this week we're going to continue on the themes of marriage and divorce that we've been covering these past couple of weeks, past few weeks now, and it's an unfortunate thing to talk about, but it's a reality, and of the issue of divorce, and so we're going to cover, or Sheikh will be covering some of the important issues relating to the separation period called the iddah, custody, and things like property and other related kind of issues, and what the Deen says about how we should conduct ourselves. Unfortunately, a lot of these issues are peppered with things that are linked with culture and tradition, and many a time the true teachings and the true traditions of how things should be done according to the Quran and Sunnah are forgotten, or they're not forgotten but they're ignored. And so, Sheikh, in terms of iddah, what does the Quran and Sunnah say about how, what is it first of all?
Okay.
And what does the Deen say about how it should be done?
Yeah. Inshallah, we'll begin with the verse of the Quran. This is from Surah At-Talaq, the very first verse of it, which obviously anybody who would like to, be exposed more to rulings regarding divorce in the Quran can read this surah. The surah's name, the chapter of divorce, At-Talaq. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها النبي إذا طلقتم النساء فطلقوهن لعدتهن وأحصوا العدة واتقوا الله ربكم لا تخرجوهن من بيوتهن ولا يخرجن إلا أن يأتين بفاحشة مبينة وتلك حدود الله ومن يتعد حدود الله فقد ظلم نفسه لا تدري لعل الله يحدث بعد ذلك أمرا. Translated as, O Messenger, O Prophet, when you divorce women, divorce them with their iddah. Iddah we'll speak about and define shortly, inshallah. وَأَحْصُوا الْعِدَّةِ, and take account of the iddah. And fear Allah your Lord. Do not remove them from your homes. Do not remove them from their homes, and they should not leave either. If they do so, or if you do so, then you have engaged in clear abomination. And these are the laws of Allah, and whosoever doesn't act upon the laws of Allah has indeed oppressed himself. You do not know, it may be that Allah Most High creates some affair after that. Okay, so this just basically touches upon iddah. Speaks about iddah a little bit, speaks about divorce also. What is iddah? Iddah is decreed by the Quran and the Sunnah, which is after a divorce, or after a woman is widowed, after the death of a lady's husband, then she enters into a period of time, which for divorce is 3 menstrual cycles. For a widow, it's 4 months and 10 days. During this period of time, there are certain restrictions upon her. The most important being, she's not permitted to leave her home. She also is not permitted to remarry in that period of time. Any nikah or marriage contract that is done in that period of time is considered invalid. Other rulings, she's to refrain from adornment during this period of time. So these are the basic and general rulings with regards to the iddah period. They're to be observed as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the ayah, whosoever violates the law of Allah has indeed oppressed his own self. And we should remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He decrees a law, then no doubt this is beneficial for us on many, many different levels. No doubt at the same time, there's going to be a trial and a difficulty therein. This is why in Arabic we call the adult Muslim person mukallaf. Okay, what is mukallaf? Mukallaf is somebody who has to take up taklif. What is taklif? Difficulty, even in Urdu, this is difficulty. Okay, often we translate taklif as responsibility, but it has that meaning also in the Arabic language, that it's something that requires effort. It's something which is going to be at least somewhat challenging. So unfortunately, many people, they don't observe this command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the command regarding iddah. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that such a person is only oppressing or wronging his own self. Indeed, he has oppressed his own self. لَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. So this is important, and like with any law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are many, many benefits. And first and foremost, always the primary benefit in observing the sacred law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that inshallah it's a means of drawing close to Allah Most High. First and foremost, it's a means of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this, when looked at in this manner, this should be seen as a blessing, a gift, and an opportunity. You see, not a burden, a weighty matter, something which a person does begrudgingly. This is the first point with regards to any law, especially one like this, which in our time, which is not observed so well or so often. Lots of people, unfortunately, even if they know about it, they fail to observe it. And this is first point with regards to this law and any other law. Okay, that it's a blessing, it's a gift, it's an opportunity. Yes, has its challenges, but it's always going to be better for us. So as well as this, no doubt this is going to have spiritual benefits, this is going to have psychological benefits, emotional benefits. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He decrees something, especially when He obliges something or prohibits something in a strong manner like this, then no doubt it's going to be beneficial on many, many different levels. Unfortunately, a human being will just look at the immediate effect of something and not look beyond that, or look at the material effect of something and not look beyond that. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in the Quran, you need to look beyond that, look further into the future. This is one point. And secondly, look at it from different perspectives. Now, so this is important and it should be observed. Now, this is the iddah period.
I think that there's a wisdom in doing such things, even though it isn't perceived, it cannot be perceived at that time. I think one of the things that one teacher reminded us of was that it plays an important role in the delineation of lineage.
Absolutely.
Because if the iddah period wasn't there, then it wasn't present, then the child was to be born in that time, then whose child was it? Okay, now you have things like DNA fingerprinting or whatever, and you got, but that wasn't possible. And even though it is possible now, the thing is that not everybody's got access to that. You would have to live in a highly developed society, not everybody lives in that. So that's another very important practical aspect of the iddah period, that it preserves the lineage.
This is important. This is a part of the wisdom. Some people, when they speak about iddah, they speak about as if this is the only benefit. This is an important benefit, no doubt. But it should be borne in mind that this is practical and clear, because the fact that she cannot marry within 3 menstrual cycles, within 4 months and 10 days, and then after that, she marries after that, then it's clear that this child doesn't belong to the first husband. This child she becomes pregnant afterwards. This belongs to the second husband. So that's important. Now,
but it's not the only.
But it's not the only point. I mean, again, as some of the ulama, they say this is amar ta'abbudi. What does it mean, amar ta'abbudi? This is, we have certain laws which you can understand, some of the clear practical benefits. You have other laws where it's not so clear. It's as if you've been commanded to do this to test your servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, but with iddah, returning to iddah, yes, this is a clear practical benefit. Why? Because the fact that she can't marry another preserves the lineage, and the fact that she's remaining in the home doesn't give the ex-husband, for example, the divorcing husband or what have you, doesn't give him the opportunity to say, well, I don't know where she's been and I don't know what she's been doing. For example, he divorces her, and then after a little while it becomes apparent that she's actually pregnant. Since she's been at home the whole time, he shouldn't make nobody should make such accusations anyway. But it limits that also. But as I said, there's so many benefits. Another point with regards to this, if the divorce is a revocable divorce, meaning that if it's only one divorce or 2 divorces, and this detailed matter should be studied in detail, but you have revocable and irrevocable. Often if it's 1 or 2 divorces only, it's considered revocable, not all of the time, but often. But if it's a revocable divorce, then what happens during the iddah is that the female, she stays in the marital home. So it's not she stays at home, meaning go to her parents' house or go to a friend's house, meaning the marital home. That's where she stays. She remains in the marital home, and this is an obligation. Unless there's some danger or some threat or what have you, she has to stay in that home. Obviously, if the husband is, unstable or dangerous, then no, she can go to a family home or what have you. She can live elsewhere. But the default ruling is she stays in the marital home. Again, if she's in the marital home and say the divorcing husband, he's never really at home, especially at night time, and it's a dangerous area and she feels insecure, it's different. But again, as I said, the default is that she stays there. So another amongst many, many benefits of the iddah is that if it's 1 or 2 divorces and they're still staying in the same home, no doubt marital relations are prohibited. These 2 people, they're not, they're not married any longer. Divorce has taken place, but it gives them time to reflect. You see, gives them time to reconcile. Gives them time to, reflect upon the good. Because often, people focus on the here and now and can't look beyond that. So it gives them this opportunity to do so. So this is another benefit. It may help them to reconcile, may help them to get back together. Having said that, even if it's a final divorce, the iddah still takes place. As I said, this is one of many, many benefits. I see one of the major benefits. This is my personal view, wallahu alam. I see one of the major benefits, the fact that, she's basically there in the marital home, not going to her family. Her family may visit her, but it's not the same as going to live with them. And same for him also, especially he should try, if there's no fitna or what have you, he should try to stay in that marital home as well. So he's not gone to spend lots and lots of time with friends and family as well. Because often what happens after divorce, the family's angry, as well as the individuals. So they end up, the more they speak about the situation, the more they fire each other up. And the more enmity, a lot of backbiting, a lot of enmity is created.
A lot of slander, all that.
Absolutely. And it makes the situation much worse, and it makes it far more difficult to reconcile, first of all. And secondly, it makes it... it makes them engage in many, many sins. So this is another amongst many, many other wisdoms. The true wisdoms behind the iddah, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows all of them. As inshallah sincere slaves and servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should have tawakkul, we should have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, despite the fact that this is difficult. It's difficult to do, but there's benefit in it.
Yeah.
So it should be, inshallah, it should be practiced. It should be studied in detail.
Yeah.
First, also, again, as I said last time, to listen to a speech on divorce or iddah or anything like this doesn't really suffice.
No.
What one should do is to pick up a reliable traditional text on this subject matter and study it with an authoritative teacher. And this is how one studies the deen, rather than just hearing bits here and there.
Inshallah. Allah give us the tawfiq to practice upon that, inshallah. I think also, when divorce happens, and the important aspect that needs consideration is children. So often, in fact, that when divorces do happen, the adults, the husband and wife, or the former husband and wife, are so busy trying to sort out things like property, which we'll get onto, and who's going to have the car, the house, the cat, or the dog, or whatever. The thing is that children, unfortunately, are left as part of that negotiation, unfortunately. And they're in some cases, if not in most cases, they're an afterthought. But in fact, but in fact, it's a very important consideration. It should be an important consideration. What does when husband and wife eventually go through a divorce and it's been completed, or in the throes of being completed, what does the deen say about how children should be looked after?
Inshallah. Bismillah. Again, we'll begin with a verse of Quran, or part of a verse of Quran. This is Surah Baqarah, part of it, ayat number 233, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده, which translates as, and a mother should not be harmed through her child, and nor should a father be harmed through his child. Okay, and this is one of the problems we have, is after divorce, again, unfortunately, often there's a lot of enmity, and people use the children to try and hurt each other. You see, if the female, she gets custody, she will try to prevent the male, seeing the father, seeing the children. This is not permitted. They shouldn't be harmed. Person shouldn't be harmed in such a manner. And second, the opposite also. If in some circumstances a male gets custody, and tries to prevent and cut off all link with the mother, both of these are extremes that the Quran does not permit. The Quran prohibits this. Rather, nobody should be hurt and nobody should be harmed. Both parents, despite the fact that they've separated, we spoke in some detail last time about how it should separate in an amicable manner, should separate with respect and dignity and honor, and not with enmity and hatred and these kind of things. So that's very important, and we discussed that. But part of that is that they think about what's best for the children, and invariably what's best for the children is to have a relationship with both. So this is a very, very important point, and it's prohibited. It's not permitted for either of the two parents to prevent the other from having access. Okay. As for custody itself, here we have some difference of opinion amongst the ulama. Okay. The strongest opinion in the Hanafi school is that if the child is female, then the mother gets custody until she becomes, according to some, baligha, until she becomes adult, and according to another opinion, at the age of 9. Now, this is in the Hanafi school. Stronger opinions is the age of 9 lunar years. Now, as for the boy, they said the age of 7. Now, so and this is in the Hanafi school. The mother has primary right to custody for the male child until he is 7, and for the female child until she is 9. We have other opinions within the Hanafi school and outside, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala and others. Imam Shafi'i is probably the most flexible. He speaks about how once the children become baligh, then they decide and they choose.
I see.
Now, once they become baligh, they decide and they choose. Now, but this is the opinion of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, that this is what should happen, and all agreed that the starting point when they are young, they are with the mother. There's no exception to this. Everybody agreed regarding that point. Where they differed is at what point does custody transfer, and at what point does the child have their own choice with regards to which parent to live with. So this is, generally speaking, the mother, she's going to have first right to custody. If she marries, then that right drops. Okay, if she remarries, then that right drops. So then it may be, usually it passes on to another female, because ideally at that very young age, we would prefer, or the Islamic teaching is, it's preferred that a female takes care rather than a male. So it may transfer onto another female. It may eventually even transfer onto the father. But again, the first right is with the mother. That's the starting point.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because as aforementioned, some in custody battles and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, is a bit of a battle, and we hear so many anecdotes of families, brothers or sisters who relate stories that they're facing difficulties with access. So make dua for all of those brothers and sisters in difficulty, inshallah. What advice would you give to somebody facing these kinds of difficulties?
First of all, ideally, there shouldn't be custody battles, because that's only really should be it's only really required to go to the courts when you can't agree amongst yourselves. You see, and this is the point. As Muslims, we should agree with what the Quran taught. We should submit to what the Sunnah taught. We should submit to what the ulama derived from Quran and Hadith, and they made it quite clear. It's with the mother, and she shouldn't deny access to the father. Okay, they agree amongst themselves. Whatever is suitable, how much access the father is going to get to them. Whatever's the norm in that particular society. Generally speaking, for these kind of matters, the Sharia looks at cultural norms or custom in any given situation. So look at whatever's normal and try to follow that. And for Muslims to have to go to court, it shows that we have.
It's quite common, though.
It's incredibly common, unfortunately. But
what you're saying is that it should try.
It's already been
it shouldn't go,
because it's already been resolved for us. This is the point, and we don't need the judge to say to us, right, you get custody and you this, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the judge of all judges, already told us that this is your right and this is your right. We shouldn't need, this is the point, we shouldn't need to. And obviously you can't always blame people for, it's not necessarily the fault of the person that initiates this, because if you've got one of the parents who's not getting any access, inevitably they're going to go to court, and they're not to blame in that case. Why? Because they're not getting their right. And for them to go to the courts to get their right is absolutely fine. But the point is, it shouldn't get to that point. You see, and we should recognize what the Quran taught us, what the Hadith taught us, and follow it, inshallah. And another point here is that the fuqaha, they spoke about how there should be no barriers. You see, as I said, that normally custody is with the mother. Normally. So she should be given custody. If for one reason or another she feels she's unable, or whatever the situation may be, and she hands over custody to the father, absolutely fine. Then she shouldn't be barred. You see, and they spoke about putting up barriers to seeing children. They even spoke about how it's not permitted to move far away. You see? Even to move far away. And they spoke about if you live in a town or a city, she's not allowed to move with the children to another town or the city unless the father agrees, because this is his right now. It's her right to keep custody, and it's his right to be able to visit them regularly. If she moves far away, then this is going to prevent it, and vice versa. when father gets custody, because again, Islamically at a certain point he's going to get it. He's not allowed to move far away. You see, so this is the point. There shouldn't be any barriers. Once again, unfortunately, the marriage didn't work out. Let's not drag the children into it. They've already been hurt enough by the parents separating. Now let's not use them as a means or a tool to cause more pain and upset to the spouse. This is just purely enmity, and it's harmful to the person involved in it. It's harmful to the other spouse. It's harmful to the children. There's no benefit in it whatsoever. We'll speak about, after the break, we'll speak about those situations in which it may be permitted to prevent the other spouse.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. We'll be back after these short few messages. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.
Gems and jewels, wise sayings, interesting events, and moral lessons from Islamic history. The first university.
The first university in the world was the University of Qarawiyyin in the city of Fas in Morocco, which was ordered to be built by Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Fihri al-Qirawani. Fatima and Maryam, his two daughters, made sure it was built as per their father's request. It was completed in 859 Hijrah and was originally a mosque for prayer, as well as an institution for knowledge and Islamic jurisprudence.
Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa
barakatuh. Just before the break, we were talking about divorce and more specifically custody. And Sheikh, you said that in some cases, the right to access could be curtailed. Under what circumstances would that be? Would that be acceptable or permitted?
This really extreme circumstances, and this is the rarity, and this shouldn't be taken as a norm. My fear is, when people hear this kind of ruling, they say, oh yes, that's my husband, he's never going to see it, because he falls under that category where I am permitted to prevent him.
Right.
But to just give some examples, if there's the father, for example, if he's the mother has custody and father wants access, or vice versa, right? If he's mentally unstable, you see, or considered dangerous, you see, or
I think most ex-wives would blame their husband.
Precisely, that's precisely the issue.
Sorry to make light of that, but
no, it's true, and this is why ultimately it's a case of sincerity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, so ultimately nobody is going to force them upon you or what have you. This is your own decision. If you have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, want to strengthen one's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then a person will do sincerely. But you're absolutely right. Many will say, no, my ex is an absolute nut job.
He's not seeing my kids at all.
He's not seeing the kids at all.
Unfortunately, not to make light of it, but they do kind of take that out of context too heavily and exaggerate.
This is the point. This is why this should be the exception, not the rule.
Just because their relationship soured between doesn't mean that a person's relationship is poor with everybody.
Exactly, precisely. So it's really extreme cases where the parent is dangerous, or there's a real threat, for example, a realistic threat that the parent might take the children and run off abroad or what have you. In these kind of cases it may be permitted, but again, this is the exception and not the rule. And this anybody who says, well, I feels deep down that they want to deny the spouse and then just use this as a pretext, this doesn't work. No, this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the hearts. So there's a few cases where it may be permitted. Another important case is where there's seeing the person is going to be incredibly severely detrimental to the person's iman, to the
Right.
person's faith.
Yeah.
But again, this is extreme situation, where maybe that person is going to take them away and start teaching them kufr and disbelief and encouraging them
right.
to
Okay.
engage in that. These kind of really extremes. Just the fact that the spouse doesn't pray. Unfortunately nowadays lots of Muslims don't pray. Okay, but that can't be again used as an excuse where he doesn't pray or she doesn't wear hijab. She's not seeing the children. This is not correct. No, because again they said, as you may be aware, that a Muslim male can marry a Christian or a Jewish woman.
Yes.
And again, in that situation, the default was that she, the mother, the Christian or Jewish mother, she does get custody. Okay. So even then she gets custody, but if she's teaching them or encouraging them towards kufr or disbelief, then it will be looked at. So this is the point, for somebody to say, well, he doesn't pray, or she doesn't wear hijab, or she doesn't fast Ramadan, or he doesn't pay zakat, or what have you, so he can't see the kids, this is a bad influence. No, it has to be something really quite extreme for a person to say that, right, we're going to cut off all kind of access.
I think, I spent some time working in the education space, and in particular with early years, and obviously, they read a lot about how important stability is and love is actually in the formative years, and I think what the a custody ruling demonstrates is that actually consistency and stability and is actually very important in the formative years of a child, and in that if as you've outlined, that if the father was to get married, then or to remarry, then the custody rights fall to him, because that is what appears to be a family kind of unit. Which
this is if the mother remarries.
If the mother, beg your pardon, if the mother remarries, then it goes to the
father.
If the mother remarries, then it goes to the father.
Yeah.
But that just. But even if the father was to have remarried and to have a spouse of a Jewish or a Christian faith, then that still would stand, would it?
Yeah. If she remarries,
yes,
even if he's remarried,
yes,
he may still get custody.
Right.
Again, as I said, it transfers from one female to another to begin.
female.
So, for example, let's give a little bit of detail.
Yeah.
The mother has a first right.
Yes.
If she gets married, then that drops, meaning now first right is the grandmother's.
Oh, right.
Especially when they're young.
Okay.
Everyone, they should be with the female.
Yeah.
Paternal grandmother, if not maternal grandmother, and like this, we speak. Then if the sisters of the child or the children are old enough, okay, or if the paternal and maternal aunts are old enough, so kind of transfer from one close relative to another, and may end up with the father.
Yeah.
Now, because many of those people may not have the ability to.
No.
You see, so it is very likely that if the mother doesn't, then it will transfer over to the father.
Yeah.
That's true. And again, Allahu Alam, this we have from hadith. This is mentioned in hadith by the Prophet ﷺ in Ahmad, a Hasan hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that she loses her right if she remarries. And the commentators on the hadith, they said because if she remarries, this person is not going to have any blood relationship with these children, so it might cause some difficulty or awkwardness or what have you in that relationship, so they may be better off then with the father.
I see.
No.
Yeah.
Allahu A'lam.
SubhanAllah, may Allah give us all the tawfiq to understand that and to practice upon it, inshallah. And I think the other aspects of splitting up is the inevitable question of property.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been subjected to the kind of settlements or by the media or anything else about how these things get played out so publicly, and it's quite disappointing really to see people's private lives being sort of bandied about and in such in such a fashion, but on a more kind of scale that happens in our communities as well. That's also kind of an endemic kind of issue as well. Is that, well, maintenance is another kind of an aspect to that as well, isn't it? I mean, that we can cover as well. So what, before we get onto property, up to what responsibility does each kind of the parents bear, the blood, obviously the original parents who have been divorced? How does what responsibility does each one have if they don't have custody, or if they do have custody? How does that switch around?
The financial responsibility remains the same.
I see. Okay.
Whether the couple are married or they're divorced, the financial responsibility is upon the male.
Right.
So that's going to remain the same. Even after separation, he still has to financially provide for the children. Now, prior to divorce, he had to financially provide for his wife and the children. So after divorce and after the iddah period, he's no longer required to financially provide for his ex-wife, but for the children, this remains. So that obligation remains, for their food and clothing and these things. He has to provide for that. So that remains the same now. And it remains an obligation upon him to do so.
Sure. Okay. And property after
property.
I know that's probably not something you're going to answer within the remainder of the program. But I mean, what are the general principles? What does the Deen say around the principles of the division of property?
I mean, it's very simple Islamically. Is whatever each person owned or owns, they take that away with them. There's no such concept that, because you are now divorcing, you have some right to your spouse's property or money. There's no such concept in Islam. A lot of Muslims, unfortunately, they do this. They will take it to courts and they will take, some money or part of the property or what have you, the house that doesn't actually belong to them. They'll take this. Why? Because living in the culture, they just go by it. Living in this community, they just go by it. But Islamically, this is a problem. It's considered absolutely prohibited. This is considered, the person who does this is usurping the property of another falsely. This is haram. This is, and taking such money is haram money, haram wealth. It's a big, big problem. So what's the Islamic teaching? So, when you've got two people who are married, they've got property, okay? Some of it belongs to one, others of it belongs to the other. Other parts of the property may be shared. So, for example, husband and wife, he has a car, she has a car, okay? Either he's bought his own car. As for her, either he bought it and gave it to her as a gift, so it's now hers. Or she purchased it with her own money. Okay. Or he purchased it and he's letting her borrow it. Whatever the case, we should know who owns this. You see, if he's purchased it and given it to her, it's hers. If she purchased it with her own money, it's hers. You see, whereas if he purchased it and says, it's my car, but you can use it, then at divorce, he can take that. Because the ownership is his. Same for him.
It stands with ownership.
Stands with ownership.
Right,
and exactly the same vice versa. He's got a car. Okay, if he purchased it with his own money, it's his. If she purchased it and gifted it to him, it's his. Because he received it as a gift. Whereas if she purchased it and she's just letting him use it or borrow it, then upon divorce, she'll take it. Because it's her property. So this is the point that, with all aspects of their property, there should be an understanding of who owns it. So if we go to the house is either his, he purchased it, or it's hers, she purchased it, or it's the both of theirs. They purchased it together. Or he purchased it and said, right, I'm gifting you a share of the house. Or she purchased it and said, I'm giving. In either case, we should have an idea of who owns it.
So it's got to be it's documented or verbally.
It should be known. And this is not only important for divorce. This is very, very important when it comes to zakat.
Of course.
Ownership of property is very important. And for husband, when you speak about zakat, for husband and wife to say that, yeah, we have got £10,000 in the bank, so we are going to pay, the zakat of, what is it, £250 on £10,000. Okay, it doesn't work like that. When we're speaking about zakat, you have two separate individuals here. Zakat is a form of worship.
So zakat is paid. I mean, we're veering away from, but it's inextricably linked to it, actually, isn't it? It's the individual. It's an individual wealth charity tax, wealth tax, isn't it?
It's an individual.
Yeah.
Individual obligatory charity that they have to give. So to do that, or to say that we've got 10,000 in the bank, we're going to pay this and zakat on it, or we don't have to pay zakat on that 10,000 because we have a debt of such and such. It doesn't work like that. The money. Okay, it's either his or it's hers or it's both of yours. And if it's both of yours, he's either 50-50 or 60-40 or what have you. Now, the debt, the same thing with the debt.
Yeah.
You see, they say we've got 10,000 in the bank, but we owe £20,000, so we're not going to pay zakat because we're actually in debt. Okay, no, who owes the 20,000? Okay, if that debt is upon him, then fine. He doesn't have to pay zakat on whatever he possesses of that money, okay. But whereas if the debt is on her, then this might wipe out her zakatable assets. So this is the point, that ownership is very, very important. So for example, just go back to that example. So they got £10,000. Let's say it's 50-50. He half of it's his, half of it's hers. Fine, they've got £5,000 each. Then there's a debt of £20,000. But this is all on him. He's not going to pay zakat.
Right.
Because this 10,000 wipes out the 5,000 he's got, where she is going to pay zakat.
Yeah.
You see, this is why it's very, and same with gold. You see, and a lot of times when I teach zakat, sisters will say that I've got gold and I've had it for some time, but I don't know if it's mine or my mother's because she's got it, but she tells me it's for me. Okay, and sometimes she tells me it is yours. You see, so we have that grey area which needs to be dealt with, because if it's the daughter's, then she pays the zakat and it's her obligation. She's liable, and she may have debts, which means she doesn't have to, or she adds it with her other property. She has to pay zakat. If it's the mother's, then she's liable. And if it's a young child, for example, if it's a non-baligh child, say it's an 8-year-old, then in Hanafi school there's no zakat on minors. No. Okay, so what does that mean? If the gold is the mother's, but she lets the child wear it, then there's zakat on it.
There's still zakat on it.
There's still zakat if it's the mother's ownership, it's the mother's property. Whereas if it's the child's actual property and the mother's just taking care of it, then there's no zakat on it.
Even if she uses it.
Even if she uses it. No zakat on it, because this is the property or under the ownership of a minor. So this is, for quite a few rulings, especially for zakat, it's important to know who owns what. Doesn't necessarily have to be documented, but it should be known. I mean, if some
known fact, commonly known,
or discussed amongst them at the very least. If there's a fear that one's property may be usurped, then it should be documented. Okay, but this is the point. There should be clarity with regards to who owns what. Right. Once we have that clarity with regards to who owns what, then what happens simply when a couple divorce, he goes his way with his property, she goes her way with her property. So if he doesn't have ownership of the house, and then upon divorce he takes her to court seeking 50, 40, 30% of the house, this is absolutely prohibited upon him to do. The law of the land will support him, but we're speaking about Islamically, he's not permitted to do so. If he does so, he's usurping her property. This is one of the gravest sins. And to steal or to usurp another's property. He's usurping her property, and this property for him is haram. No, vice versa. She doesn't have anything of the house, and she takes it. Or she has 30%. He gave her this, or she paid into it. Okay, but now she feels she can get more through the court, so she seeks 40 or 50 or 60. And this is prohibited. It's not permitted to do so. So this is something that people need to be well aware of. Now, often, especially with the home, people fall into this really grave error, because it is, it is usurping the property of another. This is absolutely haram. we should also speak about gold.
Yeah.
This is important. A lot of people ask me about this, and a lot of people speak about how it hasn't been dealt with correctly. Now, again, what I've come across is sometimes what happens, or often what happens, when a divorce occurs, the sometimes the male side, they will say that, right, as for the gold, what we gave you upon marriage, we're keeping it. What your family gave you when you got married, you can take it with you. Okay, this is not permitted. Because she enters a house, commonly in the subcontinent culture, she'll have gold, quite a lot of gold with her. Okay, so she'll have some which her family has given her. She'll have some that her husband or her husband's family gave her. Okay, so what they'll do is they'll divide it. Sometimes, I'm not saying this is all of the time, but unfortunately it's occurred too often. Sometimes they'll say, right, as for what you brought from your family, take it back with you. It's nothing to do with us. As for what we gave you, you can't have it.
You have to give it back.
You have to give it back, or we can usually sometimes it's already in the possession of the husband or the mother-in-law, what have you, and she refuses to give it or refuses to give it. Again, exactly what we said.
Because what you're saying by definition of what you said before is that was given.
That was given.
So that property rests with the person who it was given to.
The ownership, yes.
And so no, you can't say, well, okay, you take that back. Then.
Yeah, once because this gold that she was given by the husband or his family is either mahar, the dowry payment, and if it's the dowry payment, then you can't take the dowry payment back, it's hers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear, this is theirs and you can't take it back. It's either the dowry payment or it's a gift, and in either case it's now hers. You see, can't say that, well, no, I gave you this and we're no longer married, so
people
I'm taking it back.
People somehow attach it to the marriage contract, though. Oh, the marriage contract's over, so now I've got to take it. I don't know. That could be a possible illogic kind of, the poor rationale of the thinking that's directed to.
But what we would say to such a person is that your marriage contract, I would say to such a person, your marriage contract is an Islamic marriage contract, dictated by Allah and His Messenger subhanahu wa ta'ala, sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad. Okay, and the same Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave you this methodology of performing nikah and it being accepted with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also said that do not take back what you have given to them. Said this in the Quran subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not take back what you have given to them. So this is the point. It's again, everything we said about the house applies to this also, that this is usurping the property of another. If he keeps that if he keeps that gold, it's haram for him. This is haram property. No, unless in either case, unless the person willingly, happily accepts or returns. So if they're divorcing, even if, say, the wife had no ownership in the house, but he's a decent guy and he says, look, it didn't work out between us, but I feel you've put a lot into this marriage, even financially you've put a lot into it, I'm going to give you a part ownership. Fine, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Okay, or vice versa, she says that, look, the marriage hasn't worked out, it's very costly or what have you, I want to make that financial blow a little bit lighter, keep the gold that you gave me. Fine. Okay, if it's done willingly and the other party accepts it, this is absolutely fine. Whereas to take it by force, haram, absolutely prohibited, and that wealth would also be considered haram.
I think what we see from that is that actually, what people are probably expecting, complex answers or how these things are defined in the deen. Actually, it's very simple. But when we look at how justifications are made to try and usurp people, then the arguments get very complex. It's very complicated.
I should mention something actually, because I've come across this misconception, and I don't know if people are teaching it wrong, and imams are teaching it wrong, or people are choosing to misunderstand it, or are genuinely misunderstanding it. There is something which is in Arabic is called khula'a. What is khula'a? Khula'a is a situation in which the wife no longer wants to remain with her husband.
Right.
Okay, and she requests a divorce from her husband,
Right. I see.
and he refuses. Okay, so she may offer him the dowry. Okay, so say, look, if I give you back the dowry you gave me, the mahar you gave me, the gold and the money you gave me, will you then divorce me? Okay, and if he agrees, then this is called what? A khula'a. This is not a standard divorce, this is a khula'a separation.
Right.
Okay, now the separation with a payment attached to it. So in that situation,
Yes.
whatever has been agreed, he can take it now.
Oh, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
but this is a non-standard divorce. I've never ever come across a situation where the actual khula'a took place and the man is saying, I'm keeping this money, or I'm keeping this gold. There's been no khula'a whatsoever, and he's saying, no, I'm keeping it. This is not permitted.
Oh,
So
right,
this
I
is
see.
a rare exception, that if the divorce is the separation takes place with the correct wording, in the correct manner,
Yes.
with the correct offer and acceptance, which would make it a valid khula'a separation, then he can take what was agreed upon, what the woman offered him, and he agreed to it. No more. Okay, but for that to happen, it requires that kind of statement where he just says he's divorced her, he cannot take a penny.
No.
And this is the problem. I found people either misunderstanding or being mistaught.
Right, that's where you can get misinterpreted.
Yes,
Yeah.
but the point is, normally in a standard divorce,
Yeah.
he cannot take anything back whatsoever.
SubhanAllah. Again, it's been we've learnt so much in these few moments about the most important things, about most important aspects about marriage and divorce.